Heavy bombs won't stop us. Iran doubles down on its nuclear program, even as strikes hit near Bushehr, just meters from a reactor. Now fears of radioactive disaster are rising. From Yazd to Isfahan, the war is closing in on nuclear ground. Is this pressure or the brink of catastrophe? The latest wave of US-Israeli strikes is pushing the Iran conflict into a far more dangerous phase, with nuclear sites now at the center of the battlefield. Iran's atomic agency has issued a defiant message. Even heavy bombs will not stop its nuclear program.
US-Israeli attack on Ardakan yellowcake plant in Yazd is a blatant violation of the immunity of peaceful nuclear facilities, targeting the reactor fuel supply chain and nuclear medicine. Iran's nuclear tech serves global peace and human health, a path heavy bombs will never halt.
But on the ground, the risks are rapidly escalating. The International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that recent strikes landed alarmingly close to the Bushehr nuclear power plant, the country's only operational nuclear reactor. One impact point was just around 75 meters from the facility's perimeter, though the reactor itself remains intact.
Based on its independent analysis of new satellite imagery and detailed knowledge of the site, the IAEA can confirm recent impacts of military strikes close to Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant, including one just 75 meters from the site perimeter.
The warning from global nuclear authorities is stark. The IAEA says continued military activity near such a site poses a very real danger of a radiological disaster that could spread beyond Iran's borders. Russia, which has a long-standing involvement in the Bushehr facility, has been evacuating its personnel from the site, signaling growing alarm over the safety of the reactor and surrounding infrastructure. Iran has gone further, warning of a serious risk of radioactive contamination if strikes continue near Bushehr, raising fears of a potential environmental crisis in the Gulf region. Earlier on April 5th, Ardakan wrote to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, condemning US-Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure, including the Bushehr nuclear plant. Ardakan warned that strikes near Bushehr risk radioactive contamination with severe human and environmental consequences.
The strikes expose the entire region to a serious risk of radioactive contamination with serious human and environmental consequences. The repeated attacks by the aggressors in the vicinity of the active Bushehr nuclear power plant are of great concern. The proximity of these attacks to an active nuclear facility creates an intolerable situation that poses a serious risk of a radiological release.
The strikes are not isolated. In Isfahan, a key hub for Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure, recent air defense operations turned deadly. At least 4 Iranian army officers were killed while responding to incoming attacks, underscoring how deeply the conflict is penetrating sensitive strategic zones. This dual targeting of nuclear-linked regions, Bushehr in the south and Isfahan in the center, signals a shift. What began as broader military strikes is now increasingly intersecting with Iran's nuclear architecture. And yet Tehran is doubling down. Officials argue that sustained bombing cannot dismantle Iran's nuclear program, describing it as dispersed, fortified, and technologically resilient. But that raises a critical question. If strikes cannot halt the program, what is the objective of targeting areas near nuclear facilities? Critics warn the strategy risks triggering a nuclear safety crisis without delivering meaningful strategic gains. Even near misses could disrupt power systems, damage containment structures, or compromise safety mechanisms, with consequences far beyond the battlefield. The International Atomic Energy Agency has reiterated that nuclear sites must never be targeted. Yet recent strikes near Bushehr suggest that the boundary is being dangerously tested. The human toll is already evident, with a projectile near the facility killing a security staff member and damaging infrastructure. The conflict is now entering a volatile phase. Iran signals its nuclear ambitions will endure, while continued strikes heighten the risk of a catastrophic radiological incident that could reshape the region. US and Israeli strikes on key nuclear-linked infrastructure in Iran are raising fresh concerns about escalation risks and the vulnerability of sensitive sites. According to Fars news agency, US and Israeli strikes targeted the Kondab heavy water complex in central Iran on March 27th in what officials described as a two-stage attack. Hassan Gamari, an official in the central Markazi province, speaking to Fars news agency, said,
"The Kondab heavy water complex was targeted in two stages by aggression from the American and Zionist enemy."
Iranian authorities said there were no casualties and no radiation leakage following the strike. The facility located near Arak is part of Iran's nuclear research infrastructure. The reported attack followed an unusual move by the Israel Defense Forces, which issued a public evacuation warning in Persian for residents of Arak and nearby industrial zones ahead of imminent strikes on what it described as regime military infrastructure. Shortly after, the IDF confirmed it had attacked the facility.
Arak heavy water plant in central Iran, a key plutonium production site for nuclear weapons. The IDF will not allow the Iranian regime to continue advancing its nuclear weapons program, which poses an existential threat to Israel and the entire world.
Earlier, the IDF's Persian language X account posted a call for evacuation that included graphics illustrating the targeted areas and evacuation routes. Iranian state media also reported a separate strike on a yellowcake production facility in Ardakan, a site involved in the early stages of nuclear fuel processing. Officials again stated there was no release of radioactive material. Meanwhile, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has already issued warnings of retaliation.
The American Zionist enemy, despite previous warnings and cautions regarding avoiding attacks on Iranian industries, carried out numerous attacks on Iranian industrial centers today. Our fighters are in the process of carrying out retaliatory attacks. Therefore, we warn all employees of industrial companies in the region that have American shareholders, as well as heavy industries allied with the Israeli regime in the region, to immediately leave their workplaces so that their lives are not put at risk. Residents near such industries must leave their places of residence within a 1-kilometer radius until the time of the attack.
Iranian General Sayed Majid Musavi did not mince words either.
"You tested us once before. The world saw again that you yourselves started playing with fire and attacking infrastructure. This time, the equation will no longer be an eye for an eye. Wait and see." Employees of industrial companies associated with the Americans and the Zionist regime should quickly leave their workplaces to avoid endangering their lives.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi vowed to exact a heavy price after the US-Israeli strikes.
Israel has hit 2 of Iran's largest steel factories, a power plant, and civilian nuclear sites, among other infrastructure. Israel claims it acted in coordination with the US attack, contradicts POTUS' extended deadline for diplomacy. Iran will exact heavy price for Israeli crimes.
Separately, the Israeli military said that the IDF had earlier hit an Iranian chemical weapons research facility. The IDF did not clarify if this meant that Iran possessed chemical weapons or whether the Islamic Republic was still at the research stage. Iran has dramatically widened its list of potential targets in the Middle East war, warning that any hotel housing American soldiers is now fair game for military strikes. Iran's armed forces spokesman Abolfazl Shekachi made the threat on March 26th, telling state television that the presence of US forces transforms civilian sites into military ones.
"When all the Americans go into a hotel, then from our perspective, that hotel becomes American. Should we just stand by and let the Americans strike us? When we respond naturally, we have to strike wherever they are."
The warning follows reports that tens of thousands of American troops have been forced out of their regional bases after Iranian strikes rendered them unusable, relocating to hotels and office buildings across Bahrain, the UAE, and as far away as Europe. Iran's Fars news agency went further, naming specific locations it said were housing foreign forces, including the Four Seasons and Sheraton hotels in Damascus, and a newly activated US logistics base near Beirut's old airport. The IRGC then took the pressure a step further, putting out a call for civilians across the region to vacate any areas where US forces are known to be stationed, a move that signals Tehran may be preparing to act on its warnings rather than simply issue them. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi accused Washington of using Gulf nationals as cover.
From the outset of this war, US soldiers fled military bases in GCC to hide in hotels and offices. They use GCC citizens as human shields. Hotels in the US deny bookings to officers who may endanger customers. GCC hotels should do the same.
The threats land at a complicated moment. President Donald Trump extended his deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz until April 6th, saying talks were going very well, even as Washington weighed deploying an additional 10,000 troops to the region. The war, which began on February 28th after the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes killing Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has killed more than 1,900 people in Iran and over 1,100 in Lebanon. 18 Israelis and 13 American military personnel have also died. Senior US military officials have acknowledged that the dispersal of forces is making the conflict considerably harder to manage, with most troops now participating in operations remotely rather than from their original posts.